I am back, trying to get this all settled in, and I was right. It looked backwards to me when I was looking at the image on the computer, but it is forward here to you guys when I played it back. Little did I know. So, nation states. Very few states in the world is a nation and state similar. Japan. 99% of the people in Japan are Japanese. The United States is a nation state. What's the majority group in the United States? Is it 99% of the population? Is there a majority group? I know you want to say white. Let's be more sophisticated. The largest ethnic group in the United States is German Americans, 55 million. After that, it's Irish, 40 million. And then there's a lot of Hispanics. On the other hand, if you're from Spain, you can't be Hispanic. You have to be white European. So the nation state is a complex term. Germany used to be a nation that wanted to be pure, try to get rid of a lot of people. Today, Germany is still multi-ethnic. Most states in the world are multi-ethnic, very few pure nations. So the nation is something that's rooted in history, language, memory, culture. The state is an artificial creation over the last 300 years. That's a legal entity. It has sovereignty, control over its military, police. It is recognized by other such units called states, and there's 193 of them in the United Nations. It should be called the United States of States. If you don't think this is a big deal, anybody know about the Kurds who live on the borders of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria? There's 25 million Kurds in the world. They don't have their own state. 4.5 million Norwegians in Norway have their own Norwegian state, which is a pretty good nation state because they don't have a lot of minority groups. So we're dealing with nation states, but really states in this class. And the way we compare these states, we look at bits and pieces of them. When we first look at Britain in detail, we look at the legislative branch, the executive, the judiciary. We look at the economy. We look at identity. How British do they feel? Well, some feel not that British. The Scottish right now are talking about having a referendum on becoming independent in about a year. One of the peers of the British Empire, he's a Sir Sean Connery, who is Scottish, is a member of the Scottish National Party, and he would like Scotland to secede from Great Britain. They've been together now for about 300 years since the Act of Settlement, 1707, between Scotland and Great Britain. So this is still a tricky thing. So we're looking at one country in bits and pieces: legislative, executive, the voting system, and then we'll move to the next country and we'll back compare these bits and pieces. And by the time we get to Germany, you'll be able to compare big swaths of countries as a whole and try to make comparisons. That's what we're going to be doing. Now I'll be back. Don't worry, I've gone away. There are limits to what we can do when we compare. We make generalizations. This country's more democratic. This country's less democratic. I like this country's electoral system better. I like the French electoral system. It's cool. I think the French are cool because guess what they do in France? We always think the French aren't so cool. 3 weeks before an election in France, if you take a political poll and a survey and you publish it, you go to jail. Well, what happened with freedom of speech and freedom of the press? Well, in France, they figured the interests of democracy in the short term are more important. So they don't want to manipulate the election by having polls during the last 3 weeks before an election. In the United States, of course, it's a big mess. Everybody's taking guesses, and you have Nate Silver on 538.com wind up being most successful when people are guessing left and right. And some people think it manipulates the political process. So it's something the French do cool. We'll find out that there are some countries that do certain things that we like better. You might find out that the British monarchy is actually a pretty neat idea. Britain has a queen. That's the head of state. Who's their head of government? The Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron. In the United States, we have a president who does both jobs, head of state and the head of government. We're the only country in the world. In fact, we're the most different country in the world here in the United States. Everybody else has people doing these two different jobs. We have one person doing the same thing, and that's why they get gray-haired really early. Look at Barack Obama. He's already getting pretty gray. And we'll find out something about the meaning of democracy. One concept I want to introduce to you early, and we're going to keep returning to it, and particularly came from Great Britain. As far as democracy goes, it's the notion of loyal opposition. And I'm going to keep getting back to it. Loyal opposition is a notion that, well, you may lose an election, but you're still loyal to the political system and you don't try to undermine it. You don't try to undermine the economy. You don't try to undermine the leader. You may oppose their policies, but you don't try to diminish them to the point where they're less than human, or maybe they were through illegitimate reasons. You're loyal to a political system. And this is a term that came out of Britain. The saying goes, I disagree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And this is one of the most important elements of democracy. Not only at the level of leaders and elites, but at the level of the common person, at the level of the masses. Not only the elites, but the people running around. Loyal opposition. Yeah, I don't like what that person said the other day on the TV news show, but, they got a right to say it. I don't want to have them be locked up. They're not, rabble-rousing or trying to start a riot. They have a right to say it. I respect the right to say it, even if I disagree. Because what happens if you have a country that lacks loyal opposition, we have two sides pitted against each other. It happened once for 4 years in our history, 1861 to 1865. If I remember correctly, it was a war that almost killed 1 million people over political disagreements. Whether you could own people, and also other disagreements over simply different cultures. An industrial expanding north, and more of a feudal agricultural south. And those differences still exist today, 160 years later, and they're still there in people's minds. My family's from the Balkans, and believe me, people have long memories over historical events. So loyal opposition, I will argue, is a critical dimension of democracy. So that's what we'll be doing in this course. Again, I request that you read carefully. I will present these videos, and along with these videos, some of the models I present on the wall. I will also create PDF files, hard copies that you will also have access to. But I will try to create the models in real time so you can see where the logic comes from. So in a while, I will get back to the first thing I want to talk about.